Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So let us continue our study of Vivekachudamani. So Sri Shankara is explaining how this body, which is the greatest cause for bondage. So starting from Annamaya Kosha, he is explaining all the koshas. First, he has taken up the body, which is the cause for this kind of a bondage. So it continues that deliberation. Dehohamityeva jadasya buddhihi. Dehe cha jive vidishasvahandihi. Viveka vijnanavatu mahatmano brahmahamityeva mati sadatmanah. Deha ahamityeva jadasya buddhihi. The fool thinks that the body is I, or I am the body. That means the body is the Atman. Then, dehe cha jive vidishaha tu aham dihi. The scholar or the person who is little intellectually oriented thinks that he has the eye sense of the body and also jiva. I am the jiva. But then really, Viveka Vijnanavato Mahatmano. The Mahatman was the knowledge born of Viveka. Viveka Vijnanavat. What does he think? Brahmaha Mityeva Mati Sadatmanah. He always thinks that I am Brahman. He thinks of himself, always thinks of himself in the form I am Brahman. So the ordinary person whom he calls as a one of Muda Buddhi cannot think of anything beyond the body. That's where majority of the mankind live. You know, everything related to the body, food, drinking, eating, other enjoyments, day and night. How to satisfy the body, how to care it, how to care for it, how to tend for it, how to give it more and more pleasure. Everything is related to the body. A little this way, there's anger, krodha, kama, everything is coming from the idea because we are so rooted in the idea, I am the body, completely possessed by that idea. So obviously, there is no end to suffering, no end to bondage, no end to the pain and dukkha, etc., etc. And then slightly elevated people, what do you think? The person who is intellectually oriented has a little understanding of the Atman, etc., from the books, thinks that he has the sense of I in the body, no doubt, but same time, he also feels that he is a jiva who is kind of different from the body. That idea is also there, the idea I am the jiva. So for the worldly concerns, he thinks he is the body. For the other worldly concerns, or maybe some slight spiritual practice, etc., he thinks that he is the jiva. And then finally, Viveka Vijnana Veta. No, Viveka Vijnanavata. So he said the person who has discriminated between the Atman and Anatman, who is of a truly discriminating mind, to the man of knowledge, by which the wrong impression of Atman in the body, in the Anatman, has been removed, and also has acquired the direct relation, the knowledge of the IS. What he thinks? He thinks that I am Brahman. Here the word mati really actually means anubhava. He gets the experience. So who is the Mahatman? He calls that Viveka Vijnanavato Mahatmano. The Mahatmano of him whose Atman is devoid of the three kinds of limitations. You know, they say the Atman, when you are in the body, you are conditioned by three things. One is Desha Paricheda, that is limitation of the place. You know, you are confined. Beyond a point, you cannot go. Beyond a point, you cannot. So there is a bodily limitation as far as place is concerned. You cannot be all pervasive, is it not? You can only occupy a limited place, limited space. So there's a limitation regarding the space, desha paricheda, and then kala paricheda. You have time, you have to function within time. Only a limited time. You are not anadi or ananta. You have finite understanding, finite behavior. Everything is no conditioned by the time, kala. Everything you function a cycle within 24 hours. You have to do this. You have to do that. You're constantly limited by kala paricheda, and then vastu paricheda, by limited by the things. One can have possessions or this or that, but then there are limitations. So how many you can handle, how many you can experience, how many you can participate. There are one. If you do participating in one thing, you cannot do another. So there is another this vastu paricheda, or limitation with regard to things are also there. It means regarding the space, regarding the time, and then regarding the things, the vastu or the objects, etc. You are limited by that. You cannot occupy. You cannot handle. You cannot have possession of. You have so much this thing, but then there are limitations with regard to the positions or the things. So, however, due to perfect and correct knowledge, when he considers that he is that Atman, devoid of these three kind of limitations, then yatra nanyat pashyati, nanyat srunoti, nanyat vijanati, sa bhuma, yatra tvasya sarvam atmaiva bhut, tat kena kam pashyet. So when one does not see another, nanyat pashyati, nanyat srunoti, does not hear another, nanyat vijanati, does not know another, that is bhuma, sa bhuma, that is infinite. Then, various him yatra tvasya sarvam atmaiva bhut, tat kena kam pashyet. For where to him everything is the Atman, what will he see by what? Because there is only one all-pervading Atman. He is everywhere. He is all-pervading. So only when there is diversity, only when there is duality, we can see different things. If there is only one Atman, constantly that alone is all-pervading. Then obviously we cannot see anything, hear anything, nothing, no other experience is possible excepting the Atman. So a person who is established in that idea, he cannot do anything. To such a person, there's always the conviction that I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, that Anubhuti. And also in these three, you also get traces of the three schools of Vedanta. The person who thinks I am the body, who's so limited in his understanding, for such a person like the school of Madhvacharya is a wonderful starting point where the, where the individual accepts his or her limitations, his body mindedness, thinks of God as the supreme or the eternal, and then accordingly worships with a sense of fear, with a sense of awe, with a sense of surrender. So, there the limited individual looks upon the supreme as unlimited, beyond everything, and tries to take shelter, accepts, obeys. There's also fear that God is superior, God will punish. So there's a clear idea of duality. So when the person has little better understanding, for him, the Vishishtadvaita idea, I am part of that infinite, I am part of that God, I am part of that supreme. I have this limitation, I have this little body mindedness, but in essence, I am also part of that. I am that creation of God, I am part of the supreme. That kind of idea is also there. And then the last or the highly evolved soul for him, the idea I am Brahmasmi, I am the supreme Brahman, because yes, through discrimination, Viveka Vijnana, through the Vijnana knowledge of Viveka, the person has come to such a level, so such a person has no limitations and uh, uh, is ready to go the full distance with the idea I am Brahman, I am not subject to any limitations, I do not consider this body to be anything. So that way. That's why Swamiji says Dvaita to Vishtadvaita Advaita are evolutions. in the same scale of spiritual evolution. They are not, there's nothing like superior or inferior, there's nothing like false or truth. Man travels from lower truth to higher truth, one idea to another, more evolved, more evolved, more evolved. All are very essential and integral parts of spiritual evolution. According to one's taste, one's temperament, one's orientation, one can take to a spiritual striving. That's why he has given that kind of an idea. And then finally, again further he says, Atratma buddhim taja muda buddhe twang mangshamed asti purisha rashau sarvatmani brahmani nivikalpe kurushva shantim paramam bhajasva. So he exhorts the Muda. Atra atma buddhim taja muda buddhe, wo person of stupid intellect, give up identifying your Atman with the body. Atra atma buddhim taja, give up. Why? Because this body which is made of tvak, mangsha, meda, asti, purisharasau, it is full of the skin, flesh, fat, bones, and excreta, etc. How can this be the Atman? Give up this identification. Instead, what should he do? Sarvatmani Brahmani Nirvikalpe Kurushva Santim Paramam Bhajasva. Rest your mind on the Brahman, the one Atman of all, which is not subject to change. Sarvatmani, one Atman, Brahmani in that Brahman, which is Nirvikalpa, which is changeless. There is no Vikalpa, there is only one, there is no second. So there is no change. And then enjoy supreme bliss. Shantim, Paramam Shantim Bhajasva. Enjoy the supreme bliss. So why is calling in Muda Buddhi? He also said earlier, Manda Buddhi, Jadasya Buddhi. Mind is devoid of discrimination. So wrongly body is thought to be the Atman because of stupid intellect. See, again and again, the great Shankara is hammering this idea so that we may get it correctly, ultimately. Relinquish the impression this body of skin, flesh, bone, etc. is Atman. So then there are Shrutis to support this idea. Idam sarvam yadayam atma. Yad ayam atma. Idam sarvam yad ayam atma. And then sarvam khalidam brahma. All this is Brahman. All this is Brahman. Therefore, all this is Atman, all this is Brahman. Idam sarvam yadayam atma, yad ayam atma. So that is one. And also sarvam khalidam brahma, everything is Brahman. So transfer the belief that body is Atman to simply take everything that there is only that Brahman, the supreme Paramatman, which is the really from which only all these material causes etc. have come. The ultimate idea is I am only the supreme Brahman. Nirvikalpe, Vividha Kalpana Sunye. That means there is different from different imaginations of it. There is only one. There is no second imagination idea of the Brahman. It is the supreme. It is birthless, deathless, eternal, Satchit Ananda Swarup. So there is no vikalpa. There is no alternate idea of thinking or imagining, etc. So the consequence of such understanding, what is that? Attain supreme bliss. Paramam Shantim Bhajasva. Because we are firmly established in Brahman. So in the Gita it says, Shantim Nirvana Paramam Mat Sangstham Adhigacchati. Attains to peace abiding in me, and which culminates in Nirvana, culminates in Moksha. So then in the next sloka it says, there can be no liberation merely from the knowledge of Shastric books or from the Shastras without renunciation of the false identification of the Atman with the body, etc. Dehendriyadav asati brahmoditam vidvan ahantam na jahati yavat tavanna tasyasti vimukta vartapi astvesha vedanta Nayanta Darshi, Vedanta Nayanta Darshi. So, the Hendriyadav Asati, as long as the mere scholar, Vidwan, Ahantam na Jadat na Jahati Yavat, as long as it does not give up, Jahati means actually destroy or kill, does not give up, kill this idea that is body, Dehendriyadav Asati, as long as this identification, this body, sense, etc., or the Atman, Brahmoditam, then there can be no talk of release even. Tavat, Yavat, Yavat Jahati, does not, Tavat till then, na tasyasti vimukti vartapi. There cannot even be a talk of release, even if he is most proficient in Astvesha Vedanta Nayanta Darshi, even if he is most proficient in the textual knowledge of the scriptural knowledge of Buddhi, in the through Buddhi, the knowledge of Vedanta, that will not help. So one has to practice. That's why the ideas, etc., are very good. They can keep the mind occupied in a better way rather than otherwise the mind would go to lower things. So Vedanta, Chatta, study of scriptures, they're all very good because ordinary people cannot. But that's why Swamiji also said, you do intense seva, karma yoga. Why cannot all the time be in meditation? But there are very superior aspirants like Latumar, etc. They were constantly, they did not give any place to study, etc. He did not even have the capacity, but he's always in that because of the intense practice, constantly giving up the idea, killing the idea once for all that one is the body. Because he could do that, so there was no need for any even scriptural study or etc. etc. All those things help to a certain extent to keep the mind at certain level so that the mind does not go down, doesn't become indulgent in useless things, sensuous things. But these are all not enough. So long as the mere scholar, Vidwan ahantam na jahati yavat, does not give up his idea that his body, dehendriyado vasati brahmoditam, sense organs, as long as he does not give up the idea, the Brahma, the illusion, that they are all the Atman, there can be no talk of release. Tavanna tasyasti vimukti varta. Vimukti vartapi astvesha vedanta nayanta darshan, even if he is most proficient. So, how can such a person get liberated? This person may be an expert in Shastra, etc., but they will not. They always says it that Pratigata Vidya Parahasta Dhanam. So it is knowledge of the books, but will it help? No, it will not help. It's like money in somebody's hands. Will it help you to buy anything? Nothing, because it's in not your hands. So whatever just merely taking from the books, etc., will not do, but one has to really strive, even if he is not qualified even for liberation, if he does not renounce this wrong identification. Hence, by incessant contemplation, all the negative or misapprehensions must be got rid of by Sravana, Manana, and Nidhyasana, that type of instant practices, then when it is possible. So mere reading of books, etc., will not help. Vedanta, Nayanta, Nayanta Darshi. What is that? Naya or Shastra. Tasya Antaha, its goal. Antadarshi, the goal was capable of seeing the goal of Vedanta is Vedanta Nayanta Darshi. But that is not enough. One has to practice very seriously. And then, so a very easy way of effecting such a renunciation is advocated by Shankaracharya, that is vichara or earnest inquiry or discrimination. Vichara we can do always when the mind is there, time is there, whenever there is an opportunity, whenever it is possible. If there's a constant discrimination, practice of discrimination, that will greatly help. How Chaya Sharire प्रतिबिंब गात्रे यावत् स्वप्न देहे हृदि कल्पितांगे यतात्म बुद्धि स्तवनास्ति काचित् जीवत शरीरे च तथैव मास्तु. What is explained? Chaya sharire pratibimba gatre. So do not identify. Do you identify your Atman with the shadow of your body or its reflection in the mirror? The body, the Chaya Sharira, shadow, our own shadow, and Pratibimba Gatre, the reflection of the Gatra, Sharira, the Pratibimba, these are not identified with the Atman. We know that they are not the Atman. Their knowledge is very clear. Not only that, yes, Swapna Dehe Hridi Kalpitange, or when it is seen in a dream, or when it is imagined in the mind, Kalpitange, Hridi Kalpitange, then we do not identify this body to be the Atman, this body to be the ultimate. We know there is no relation there. In the same way, Jiva Sharire chu Tateva Mastu. If in the same way it can be done with a living body, and the body is there when it's actually functioning, if this knowledge can be brought to the fore, that is the Vichara. Yes, this body is not the Atman. Just as we easily know what is appearing in the dream, what is appearing in the imagination, or in the Pratibimba, or in the shadow, is not the Atman. In the same way, that which is living, that also should be thought of to be not the Atman, is one way of discrimination. So all the what happens in the all these cases, in the respective cases, the objects are seen to be separate from the seer. When we see the shadow, we know that I am not the shadow, I am different from the shadow. When you see the mirror, the image, we know I am not the same as the mirror, the image. So similarly, in the living body, if it is felt that I am not that Atman, I am different from it, the discrimination, that separation, Munja grass, they said earlier, no, how it is very carefully separated, the Atman and Anatman from the Munja grass. The same way from this body, if it can be carefully segregated, no, this is not the Atman, then there's a possibility of getting to that supreme uh, idea of the Atman. Then, so again, he clearly says that the person who wants to get out of the Annamaya kosha, because now all these koshas are bondages, no? Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anand, all these koshas, the five sheets are all Vastika, Celestica, Listica, five thinnest bondage is the thinnest covering is the Anandamaya kosha. But these are all limitations or bondages. So to give up, to get rid of that, one has to give up the idea, the Dehatma Buddhi should be given up. देहात्मदिहि एव निरामसिद्ध्यां जन्मादि दुःख प्रभवस्य बीजं ततस्ततस्त्वं जहितां प्रयत्नात् त्यक्ते तु चित्ते न पुनर्भवाशा. So it clearly says, for the person whose intellect rests on the asat nrinam asadhyam, dhi which is resting in asat is asadhi. The buddhi that is resting in the asat or the atman, Dehatma Dihi Esha, the notion that body is the Atman, that itself, Janmadi Dukkha Prabhavasya Bijam, that is the cause for the race of the sorrows, Dukkha Prabhava Bijam, the seed for the arising of sorrows, beginning with birth, Janmadi, that is the first, everything starts with birth, that is the first sign of Dukkha. That's why whenever a child is born, first it starts weeping, it doesn't laugh. See, it could as well be, we say, when a child is born, if it doesn't weep, people are so anxious. They make it just to be made to weep, then only the birth is complete. But it could also be in the design that it laughs beautifully whenever it. That is a sign of birth. Does he say that? No. Why? Because the dukkha begins from janma. The moment you are born, the first sign of dukkha, you start weeping. So, janmadi dukkha prabhavasya bijam yatastatvam jahitam prayatnat. Therefore, Yataha tatastvam jahi tam prayatnat. By effort, therefore, put an end to this notion I am the Atman, that the body is the Atman. You put an end to this notion. Jahi, put an end, or kill it. A prayatnat, by effort. Once the mind, tyakte tu chitte na punar bhavasa. When the mind is detached from the body, etc., then there is no possibility of being born again. You can completely conquer the idea of birth and also the idea of death the moment the mind is completely detached from the body. Asadya means intellect rests on the asad vastu, that is anatman, being assumed to be atman. Dehatmadhi, deveva atmayati dhi. The belief that body itself is the atman is dehatmadhi. And then Janmadi dukkha prabhavsya bijam. The belief itself is a seed. I am the body, the Atman is the body. That belief itself is a seed of the series of sorrows beginning with birth, death, etc. As a person thinks that his body is the Atman, he believes that birth and death pertain to the Atman. So there is again a mixing up, whereas Atman is Anadi and Ananta is Asim, is infinite, birthless, deathless. So Dehatma Buddhi is the source of all sorrow. It ought to be given up with effort, prayatnena. It doesn't happen just like that. And to hear the words the Guru, reflect, and then contemplate Smarana, Manana, Nidhi, Shravana, Manana, Nidhijasana, all those disciplines. And it has to be, the idea of the body has to be Jahi, it's to be completely given up or destroyed. So if the mind is detached from the body, then in the absence of any mental activity, there will be no trace of even attachment to it. No, if the attachment to the body grows or happens to the mind, it's only the mind that takes the senses to the sense objects. Without the mind, the senses cannot grasp the sense objects. If the mind is not there in front of you, a most beautiful dish can, a most wonderful item can be kept, but if you may not even be looking at it. Physically, the eyes may be there. If the mind is not there, the act of seeing does not take place. So all the attachment, etc., they grow only through the mind. So if the mind is detached, then none of the activities of the sense organs will not happen. There won't be any bondage, there won't be any misunderstanding. So that is why it is considered that if the mind is withdrawn completely from the body and also from the idea that body is the Atman, then it's possible that one can completely get rid of the bondage of birth and death. So that's what the Suti says. So um, the person who has in the Atman the same idea with which he normally hold on to the body and which cuts at the root of the false identification, such a person is liberated even if he lives in this world. That's what he says. Bhavet asya sa jivan api muchyate, even if he is alive. So it's called the Jivan Mukti. Even in the very life itself, he completely detaches oneself from the idea that I am the body. The mind is totally detached from the body in that sense. And then this completely cuts at the root of the false identification. And then such a person is said to be liberated even in this very life. And then now he takes up the next kosha. For the Annamaya kosha, he devoted so many slokas, about 10 slokas. Now he will take about the Pranamaya kosha. कर्मेन्द्रियैः पञ्चभिः पञ्चभिरञ्चितोऽयं प्राणो भवेत् प्राणमयस्तु कोशः येनात्मवान् अन्नमयोऽनुपूर्णः प्रवर्तते सौ सकलक्रियासु. So karmendriyehi, karmendri panchabihi, the five panchabihi anchitaha, I am prana bhavet pranamayastu koshaha. So the prana, in combination with the five sense organs, the organs of action, constitute the pranamaya kosha. So each kosha is also explaining beautifully. What is this pranamaya kosha? It is karmendriyas, the five karmendriyas, vak, pani, pada, payu, pasta. These are the five indriyas, karmendriyas. These, along with the prana, they constitute the pranamaya kosha. येनात्मवान् अन्नमयो अनुपूर्णः प्रवर्ततोऽसौ प्रवर्तते असौ सकलक्रियासु. So, permeated by the prana, the Annamaya Kosha, Enatmavan Annamaya Anupurnaha, by permeated by the prana, the Annamaya Kosha gets its life by the prana entering into it, and that engages in all actions, Sakala Kriyasu. So, actually, the Vak, Pani, Pada, Payu, Pasta, all these are all, Indriyas are all, basically, they are all part of the Annamaya Kosha or the Sharira, but they kind of get their life by the prana entering into them, and because of that, they participate in so many activities. Sakala Kriyasu, Pravartate Asau Sakala Kriyasu, they enter, engage in all actions. So, by the karmendriyas, the speech, hands, feet, the excretory organs, and the organs of reproduction, they are responsible for speaking, then actions, vak, pani, pada, moving about, and then payu and upasta, the excretion and the sensual pleasures. These are born of rajoguna of the five elements, beginning with akasha. We really saw previously in the Panchikarana how the various portions, various indriyas, etc., are created. So, from the rajoguna of the elements, akasha, etc., these karmendriyas are created. The effects of the combination of five elements in their rajas aspect is prana or breath. So it is the wind or vayu which moves about in the inside the body. Pranamaya kosha is named after it. So he will say again in the next how it is, how it goes in and out like vayu. So that is what sustains. Without the pranamaya kosha, prana, the annamaya kosha is lifeless, it's useless. So this prana is what sustains the annamaya kosha. Covering the Atman with the urges of hunger, thirst, etc., it is the obstacle for the awareness of the Atman. Because of this, the hunger, thirst, etc., they're all the qualities of prana. So, they introduce all these ideas in the body. So, they think that the Atman is also part of all that, whereas the Atman has no hunger, no thirst, etc. So it makes a person feel I am thirsty, I am hungry, instead of realizing that hunger, thirst, etc. are prana dharma, or they wrongly attributed them to the Atman. Yena Atman annamayo anupurnaha, yenatmana, yenatmavan annamayo anupurnaha. What is that? The Shruti Tenesha Purnaha Savayesha Purusho Vidha Eva Tasya Purusha Vidatam Anvayam Purusha Vidaha. See, the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vigyanmaya, Anande Kosha, they form a successive uh, series. So, whatever happens in Annamaya Kosha is wrongly identified as belonging to the Atman by the reason it is being pervaded by Pranamaya Kosha. So the Pranamaya Kosha gives that sense of reality to Annamaya Kosha. All the actions of Annamaya Kosha happen because of Pranamaya Koshas, that prana, and that it wrongly identifies it to Atman, thinks that it is the Atman that is functioning that way. So in the successive koshas, it will happen. The previous kosha is kind of made active or powerful by the successive kosha. तस्मादेव एतस्मात् अन्नरसमयात् अन्योन्तर आत्मा प्राणमयः. Pranamaya kosha is different from annamaya kosha, but it is atma embedded in it. It is where pranamaya kosha that the annamaya kosha becomes atmavan. The annamaya kosha gets a sense of reality because of pranamaya kosha. The prana envelops the body fully. The atma too is said to envelop it like that. Tasya Purusha Vidatam Anvayam Purusha Vidaya. So enveloping the body, the prana assumes the form of Purusha, uh, and it gives a wrong impression to the Annamaya Kosha that it is Atman that is having anger restricted. The Atman making the person wrongly identifying the body with the Atman. The ground for this is Pranamaya Kosha. So it being of this nature, the Pranamaya Kosha, it embarks on all actions forgetting what is good and avoiding what is evil. So the unintelligent always function by being acted upon by what is intelligent. See, Annamaya Kosha by itself has no capacity to do anything, is it not? So if there's no connection with the prana in any part of the body, it is ceases to function as a normal limb. In a dead body, there is total disconnection with the prana, so it becomes totally non-sentient. So the prana as a whole is a collective combination, while it functions in the individual elements, in individual limbs, as they are made or as they are made to uh, behave. So it's a kind of a there's a distributive pervasiveness of prana in all the elements. But so all are the effects of Rajoguna. It's group that the organs of action, karmendriyas, are moved by the pranamaya kosha. It's very clear actually. Without prana, none of the organs can function, and that is the reason why this kind of feeling is happening. And then that the pranamaya kosha is not the Atman, he again explains through another sloka. Naivatmayam pranamayo vayu gantana ganta गन्ता अगन्ता वायुवद वायुवत् अन्तर्बहिरेशः यस्मात् किञ्चित् प्रभापि न न वे न वेत्तिष्ठमनिष्टं स्वं वान्यं वा किञ्चन नित्यं परतन्त्रः नेवात्मायं प्राणमयो वायुविकार. This pranamaya kosha can never be the Atma. Na eva ayam pranamaya. Why? It is the effect of the wind. Vayu vikara. Gata Ganta Aganta Vayuvat Antar Bahireshacha. Just as the air or the Vayu, just it goes in and out. Similarly, this also goes and goes in and goes out inside the body. It comes into the body, goes out of it, just as air. And then, therefore, Yasmat Kinchit Kinchit Vapi न वेत्ति इष्टम अनिष्टम स्वम स्वम वा अन्यम वा किंचन. Even in the very least, it is not aware of the good or evil anywhere at any time, either it itself or of others, because it is completely dependent. Nityam paratantra is always dependent on something else. It cannot be the Atma. So the pranamaya kosha, the prana, this activates the Annamaya kosha, makes it function, makes it participate, make all the limbs function, etc., etc. Thus, is there even the least awareness of the prana that what is happening, whether it's good or bad, anything like that? Has it anything? No. Just as in the outside vayu also, something good scent also it carries, bad scent also it carries. There is no sense of discrimination. In the same way, the pranamaya kosha has no idea of good or bad or anything, either in itself or with respect to anything else. It's always nityam paratantra, always dependent on anything. Why? It's dependent on the next kosha, namely manomaya kosha. It is the manomaya kosha which really directs. The indriyas might be there. Without prana, they cannot function. But for them to actually reach the sense object and bring all those experiences, you need the mind or the manomaya kosha. So the pranamaya kosha is the effect of the activity of vayu. So it is not the Atman, because Atman is not subject to any action. It is it has no kriya anything. Therefore, it is not Atman. Reason is, like vayu, this pranamaya kosha also goes in and goes out. When there is inhalation, it goes in. When there is exhalation, it goes out. So it is just like the winds outside. It's for a limited purpose of keeping the annamaya kosha alive or active. So The Pranamaya Kosha, therefore, because it participates along with Annamaya Kosha, it is definitely characterized by activity and is limited. It cannot go beyond a certain things. It is because the Atman is all pervasive, it is actionless. Whereas Pranamaya Kosha has meaning only as long as it is within the body. It is limited by the body, it is not beyond that. Therefore, it is active, but it is its boundaries are fixed like in a limited way. It cannot think beyond that. Therefore, it is just like the Vayu. The later of sloka, it is conveyed that being non-intelligent and dependent on something outside, therefore there is reason for Pranamaya Kosha not being Atman. If the Atman is uh, Swayam Siddha, it knows itself. So Samvedya, it's known, it's ever the knower, is always in the knowledge, whereas Pranamaya Kosha has no such awareness of good or bad, etc. So it does not apprehend anything that is good or bad, joy or sorrow, any place by itself or others, hence is always dependent on something else. It is well known that the breath is can easily be controlled through pranayama. So it has a very limited capacity, ability, etc. It is not unlimited. Therefore, as a pranayama is characterized by activity, it has that kind of its boundaries are decided and fixed. It is non-intelligent and it is also is dependent on something extraneous. It cannot be the Atman, which is different from all these features. The Pranamukasha, where the Atman as is awake in the dreamless sleep, it must be aware of activities that are happening. Supposing you are dreaming, you are in that kind of condition. Even in dreamless sleep, if you take the dreamless sleep, the Atman is aware even in the dreamless sleep because when you get up, the first thing we say is, yes, I did not know anything. I had a wonderful sleep. I slept very well. So, this awareness, this I, the Atman, that was there in the dreamless sleep. But if prana is also to be there, then that should be aware of the things that might happen. Suppose somebody comes in the room, someone goes out, anything. Is the pranamaya kosha aware of anything? Nothing is aware. So obviously, it cannot also be said to be awake when its own servants like eyes, etc., are all non-functioning. Therefore, the pranamaya kosha can never be considered to be Atman because it has limitations, it has activities, its area is bound. So it is without the mind, absolutely, it cannot function at all. So it cannot recognize good or bad anything. So the manomaya, pranamaya kosha is also not the Atman. Then he will take up next the Manomaya Kosha. We shall take up later. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tatsat Sri Ramakrishna Namaste.